Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
On behalf of NMP team, we would like to welcome and acknowledge the presence of all the participants connected to us in this first virtual event for clients about technology readiness levels in NMP topics. For a better experience, we advise you to enter in full screen mode. You may also interact with us by writing in the chat box that is available below the video streaming. Please scroll down the web page to see the questions and comments during the event. Dr. Nicholas Delianakis, Deputy Head of Unit of the European Commission from DG RTD, CAT Strategy, will give an overview of the description and the main characteristics of technology readiness levels in NMP work program. We will now start with a presentation that will be followed by a period for questions and answers. You may type your questions or comments during the presentation so that we can better organize them. Dr. Nicholas, we now pass the emission to you and ask you to start the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone from Brussels. I'm sorry the view from here is not as nice as the one in Lisbon. So thank you for sending all your, or many of your questions in the TRLs. Some of them, the answers may become apparent in the presentation, and I will also take the questions afterwards. And in some cases, I ask for a little more time to put some examples together to in connection with some of the questions.
Can you no.
Okay, excuse me. All right, first slide, please. Right. So, first of all, I'm sure you know this, but just to refresh your memories, I will say a few words about key enabling technologies. As you know, in this part of the work program, NMP, we are addressing 4 of the 6 key enabling technologies, which we are supporting because they are important in helping industry develop applications that can help in its competitiveness. They can help solve societal challenges, and they are technology and resource intensive. So out of the 6 key enabling technologies, we support nanotechnologies, advanced materials, advanced manufacturing and processing, and biotechnology, while our colleagues in DG Connect in the ICT work program support photonics and micro and nano electronics. Now, we also, in this directorate, we also have an overall coordinating role for the approach to all of the 6 GETs, including the technology readiness levels, and the general approach to how these are supported, how the GETs are supported in Horizon 2020. Next slide. Right. Here is just one example of how several different key enabling technologies can be brought to bear on a single problem. And this brings me to, in this case, nanomedicine, applications in health. This brings me to an important issue, that is the one of integration across Horizon 2020. What we're trying to do in our part of Horizon 2020 in NMP is to develop key enabling technologies to the extent that industry can take them over, and to the extent that societal challenges can use some of these in the applications that they support. So what we do in NMP should be seen as a part of a continuum. We try to support the development of key enabling technologies from the low to medium to high technology readiness levels. So we look at the what the so-called excellent science part of Horizon 2020 for the developments at the lower technology readiness levels. And we are also working very closely with all the societal challenges of Horizon 2020 to see how the kits that are developed with funding from NMP, but not only, can be used in societal challenges, where, of course, the emphasis is not on the technology or on the industrial competitiveness, but on particular solutions to societal challenges. Next slide, please. So the issues we are trying to address is that on the one hand, we have a strong position in science, including in patenting activity, even though the patenting activity has been declining slowly in the last few years. So that is something we have to reverse. But even more importantly, we have to make sure that we bridge the gap between the technology base and the manufacturing base for the reasons that I explained earlier. And to do this, we, as you have already seen from the first work program and even the last two work programs of FP7, as you have seen, we are trying to add support for demonstrators and pilot lines at the medium to high TRLs, because we think that this is the main gap nowadays in moving from lab to industry and to ultimately to products. We don't go all the way to the products, because that is not the role of a public funding program, but we look at the industrial part, to the industrial partners for taking the results forward, for making further investments, and for integrating the technologies. Next slide, please. So the main priorities for key enabling technologies is, as I said already, it is to deploy them, and we deploy them using demonstrators and pilot lines. And we are also looking for, we are working with industry and other players to develop strategic research agendas which are linked to value chains. That is very important. So we are not looking only at the development of technologies, at the various steps that are needed in developing technologies. We are looking at how these technologies fit into particular value chains. And of course, we are trying to address important value chains. And we are asking the proposers to do as you have seen already in the first work program of Horizon, we have been asking for outline business plans. And in these outline business plans that can be developed further, we are asking for some indications as to the value chains that will be addressed and how the proposers, the industrial partners in particular, will go about, on the one hand, increasing their own engagement, and on the other hand, addressing the value chains in order to reach the markets. You know that we have pilots and demonstrators in a lot of our topics, while other topics in our work programs, the first work program as well as the one we are now developing, are about if you like, activities that lead to these pilots and demonstrators, activities that are necessary to complement the pilots and demonstrators, including, of course, coordination and support actions. Another important aspect of our policy are the contributions to cross-cutting kits. Cross-cutting kits are combinations of kits with a manufacturing element. And I referred to that already in the context of the societal challenges and the industrial commitment. So we, at the beginning of Horizon, we made a political commitment of 30% of the budget of the kits, which is something like 6 billion euros for the 7 years of Horizon 2020, will go to these integrating activities, the cross-cutting kits. And you will see that many of our topics in the first work program, and also in the next one, are identified as cross-cutting CAT activities. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. I don't think that's the next one. It was a TRL scale. I think you're going back now.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you. So just to remind you, these are the scale of technology readiness levels. As most of you know, technology readiness levels have been used before in many different contexts. More or less the same scale has been used in several different ways, and the definitions are somewhat different. The important thing for us, and this is one of the questions, that these TRLs are about the maturity of the technologies, not about indirectly translates to closeness to markets, but the way we use them is to refer to the maturity of the technology, of the key enabling technologies that we are addressing in each topic. And the critical area for us is from 4 to 7. It's the gap from the perceived gap from 4 to 7. As you have seen already, that is where our activities are, with very few exceptions. Now, let me say a few words, because there were a number of questions about that. So 5 and 6 are the two key where is the area where a lot of our activities in terms of the funding are. These are the demonstrators in relevant environments. So this is the all-important step between the lab and industry. Whereas 7 is the demonstration or the pilot line in the operational environment. That is a difference between 7 and 6. So in 5 and 6, we are talking about developing the pilot line or the demonstrator in a way that can be used by industry, but it's not necessarily in the industrial. It is an industrially relevant environment, so it could be of course, in a research center. While 7 is supposed to be the integration, or rather the implementation in the operational environment. And in general, it is expected to be in industry. What you will see that in our topics, we never have a topic that is just 7. We have topics reaching 7. The idea is that we expect the bulk of the activities, the bulk of the funding, to be in such a case at 5 to 6, say, but we also expect the project to reach 7. So the idea is that all the problems that are needed to reach 7 will be solved at what we call TRL 5 to 6 in such cases. And of course, we give a range, which means that the funding can span that range. Not everything in the project has to be at one TRL. We understand that in order to prepare for a final TRL, a number of different activities have to be done at different TRLs, within reason, of course. Because if your technology is at, let's say, TRL 3, you cannot, in a single project, expect that you will reach 7. And we do not ask for that. So we are fine-tuning the approach in the second work program, in the work program that we are developing now for 2015 to 2016. The idea is exactly the same, but in order to anticipate some of these questions and problems, we are rewriting slightly the wording that we use for the TRLs. So the definitions of the TRLs have not changed, but we are rewriting the wording in order to describe better what I just explained, how each topic addresses a range of TRLs, where the activities are expected to be and what is funded, and where the funding stops. Now, as you also know, each topic comes with a funding level. Either it is a research and innovation action, in which case the funding is 100% of the direct costs, or it is an innovation action, whereby the funding is at 70% of direct costs for the profit-making partners, and still 100% for the other partners, the non-profit-making partners. That depends just on the topic. It does not depend on the TRL. So anything that happens in an innovation action is funded at 70% for the profit-making partners, and everything that happens in a RIA project is funded at 100% for everyone, all the partners. But of course, there is some correlation between. So in general, we use the RIAs for the low to medium TRLs, and in general, we use the IAs, innovation actions, for the higher TRLs, 5, 6, and 7. And again, it depends on the center of gravity. There were some apparent inconsistencies in the first work program, for which we had a good explanation. For example, the open access pilot lines were at 100%. They were RIAs, even though they addressed high TRLs, because they were seen as an infrastructure. In the new work program, we are trying to be even more consistent than in the first one. Next slide, please. Now, as I explained already, we are trying to move cats closer to the market, but we are not going to address market activities. One of the questions was the difference, how the TRL relates to markets, and how it relates to the manufacturing readiness level, or MRL. So the answer is that here we develop the key enabling technologies. So when a key enabling technology reaches a high TRL, it does not necessarily mean that it is a product. In any case, we stop at 7. But even beyond that, it does not mean that the corresponding cat is ready for the market. What it means is that it is ready to be integrated possibly with other technologies in a product or a solution, which may in turn reach the market. Now, and the manufacturing readiness level is yet another question that is not directly addressed here, even though by going to the higher TRLs for the key enabling technologies, we certainly have manufacturing in mind, the ability to manufacture the corresponding material or nanomaterial in the quantities that are needed for industrial applications, or in the case of production, to demonstrate the production technology in a relevant environment. So the concepts of TRL, MRL, manufacturing readiness level, and closeness to the market are related but different. Next slide, please. So I have been asked for examples, and there was a very good question on how a technology can, how to give an example of a technology that has moved from lower TRLs to higher TRLs. And I will try to come up looking at the history of NMP over the years. I will, and with help from some colleagues, I will try to come up with something like that. For now, I just have, as in the previous version of the presentation, I just have 2 examples of demonstrators. One has come from the advanced manufacturing and processing field, and it's a demonstrator for a mini factory for customized production. Next slide, please. The next one has come from the nanotechnology, and it is about a material whose transmittance can be changed. Both of these were actually FP7 projects, but obviously we are funding similar projects under Horizon, and we are continuing the work. Someone asked me for the history of TRLs, the use of TRLs, and the answer is that in FP7 we had TRLs in mind in the second half of FP7, but we did not use the term, partly because it was not being understood in a uniform way across Horizon, across FP7, amongst the colleagues who were implementing the different parts of FP7, partly because it was a new concept. So instead, in many of the concepts, we used the wording for TRLs 5 and 6 in the description of the topic. And then in the first work program of Horizon, which was linked to the CAT policy explicitly, we began to use consistently the TRL scale. And as you may have seen, it has also been used in several, but not all other parts of Horizon in the societal challenges. And it is one of the general annexes of the Horizon 2020 work program. So it is where it is used now in Horizon, it is used in a consistent way. The concept of TRL is used in a consistent way. Next slide, please. So some issues to consider, and then I will move to the to some of the answers to at least some of the questions you have asked me. So I have said already that the TRL does not automatically translate to closeness to the market. But I will remind you at this stage that we are asking in the work program, we are asking proposers to think about the next steps. So where we fund gets, whether at a medium TRL or a relatively high TRL, we are asking for an outline business plan in general, whereby proposers have to tell us what their expectations are with regard to the possible markets and with regard to the activities that they will engage in after a successful project funded by Horizon to take the ideas further. And that is part of the evaluation. It is evaluated under impact. In the new work program, we will both clarify this concept of the business outline business plans. So whereas in the first work program we only had 1 or 2 lines on this, in the new work program, excuse me, in the new work program we are developing a longer text with more guidance and more targets as to what we expect under the outline business plans. To guide proposers and also to make it slightly more challenging. We are also looking very carefully at the expected impacts. As you know, each topic has a set of expected impacts, and we are trying to make these as concrete as possible. Several of the expected impacts are targets with regard to performance, for example, less weight, less pollution, less use of raw materials, more reliability, and so on and so forth. And in addition to that, we will be asking for, in effect, for further indication of what will be done after the project to make it, to make sure it has the highest possible impact. And of course, impact is something that we are looking at when we, not only when we evaluate proposals, but also when we are evaluating the program as a whole. And we are already learning some lessons about that. We have already seen how the impact is more of a question both for proposers and for evaluators. Evaluators, incidentally, receive exactly the same briefing as you see in the work program. So there is nothing that we tell evaluators about TRLs or about outline business plans or anything else that we are not telling proposers through the work program and through the interactions like the one today. I hope that when you see the new work program for 2016 and 2017, you will see that there is more clarity on the use of TRLs, on the use of the two different the research and innovation actions and innovation actions, and on what we expect under the outline business plans, and what we expect to see in a proposal to demonstrate its likely impact. I would remind you also that proposals often differ a lot in this respect. Very often we see proposals that are excellent from the technological point of view, which is of course the first evaluation criterion, but which differ with regard to the plans of exploitation. There are some proposals have excellent plans, other proposals have more vague and less convincing plans. And that, of course, makes a difference. As you've seen, the selection rate is not that high. It is around 15% now for the pilot lines and for the PPPs. But I think it is fair to say that where a proposal convincingly addresses impact, including the approach to TRLs and to the outline business plans, then the effective selection rate for such a project, if you like, the chances of success are far higher than 15%, because there are a lot of proposals out there that fail to address impact convincingly. So we are doing what we can to help both proposers and experts, but I would like to send a strong message that impact is important and has to be taken seriously. And it has to be taken seriously at the proposal stage, the project stage, and after the project is over. Next slide, please. Right, now I will move to the, if that is all right, I will move to the written questions I have received. As you have seen, I have tried to answer some of these during the presentation, and I will now go quickly over them and then see if there are any additional questions. So I take them in the order in which they have been printed. I hope that I will cover all of them by the end. How to provide proof in proposals of the requested TRL in the call text is reached. Well, I've explained this to a large extent, and please remember also that we are not, in general, we are not looking at a single TRL. I will also say that we now see, we have seen many cases of proposals that are unrealistic with regard to the TRL they are addressing. So they are submitted to a topic that has, let's say, targets TRL 6, but they are no way near that TRL. The technology they propose is no way near. That has to be, proposers have to think about that. They have to be ambitious on the one hand, realistic on the other hand. So will the concept stay the same? Yes, I've explained what aspects remain the same, namely the scale and the underlying policy, but also how we will try to clarify it, both for proposers and for experts. Then the link between RIAs and the TRL, I explained that as well as I could. It's still not an absolute link, but you will find that in the new work program, there will be, the link will be clearer. How to link with core topics that do not mention TRLs? Well, all our topics do mention TRLs, apart from of course, the coordination and support actions and the ERANETs. Now, how to deal with core topics in other parts of Horizon that do not mention TRLs? There you will have to, I suggest that you ask our colleagues if you have concerns about particular topics. The only other thing that I will say is that increasingly the concept of TRLs is being used across Horizon, the societal challenges of Horizon 2020. How should we classify the projects in terms of TRL? I don't quite understand this, but maybe it is linked to the next question. Should we identify the TRL for each activity in the project? So I would say the quick answer to that is no. Remember that the same funding rate applies to all activities in the project. So what you have to do is to have a convincing set of actions, work packages in your proposal to make sure that you are likely to demonstrate that you are likely to reach the target TRL at the end of the project. And of course, it is acceptable and understood that some or many of the activities or the work packages will be at a lower TRL than the one targeted. In fact, the main bulk of the activities, as I explained, will be at a lower TRL than the one targeted. Because the target is what you reach at the very end of the project, ideally. Which have been the specific problems related to the applicant's interpretations of TRLs observed in the evaluation of proposals? Well, I mentioned two problems already. One is that often enough, we see proposals that are unrealistic with regard to the TRL of the topic they are trying to address. And the other issue we have seen is that even where the TRL is adequately addressed from the technological point of view, sometimes the business plan, the outline business plan, is not thorough and convincing. So we have developed a template which so far we have used to guide funded projects with regard to the business plans that are to be developed once a project is funded during the project. But we will now use parts of that template as guidance on the outline business plans in the new work program. And we hope that this is going to help proposers and experts. Which TRL is required to apply for the phase 1 of the SME instrument? Well, phase 1 is about the exploratory phase. I will have to consult my colleagues of the SME instrument for a more precise answer, but I would say that you have to come up with, you have to present a technology that is credible. I'm not sure this goes with a particular TRL, but if you are an SME, you have to have a technology that is worthy of further investigation. I imagine that it has to be at least TRL 3 or 4, but I will double check this answer. Please don't quote me on this one. And of course, what applies to the SME instrument in NMP applies to the whole, to the SME instrument as a whole. Because as you know, we don't write the topic, we only write the very rough scope for it, and all the rest follows the same principles for all the SME instruments. Incidentally, the new work program, all the topics of the SME instrument will appear under a single call in a single part of the work program. So the NMP contributions to the SME instrument will not appear as NMP topics in the NMP part. You will find them under the SME, the dedicated SME call. But the approach is exactly the same as before. From which level may I consider I have a product? Well, we have discussed that. How the scale is applied for individual inventions versus against the whole project, bearing in mind most projects have several inventions, often at different TRLs. Well, I think I have addressed this already, that it is accepted that the project in general spans a range of TRLs. Not too large a range, but a range nevertheless. And it is accepted that some of the elements that are needed to make progress will have to be pursued in the project at a lower TRL than the center of weight. So I think the next question is similar. In a multidisciplinary proposal, different technologies may be at different starting TRLs. How much latitude is there to have certain parts which are outside the TRL range quoted in the call text? Well, there is some latitude because it is indicative. At the end of the day, you have to come up with credible proposals. Within reason, any experts will accept a proposal that makes a case for starting at a lower TRL than the range given in the particular topic. But of course, you have to look at the funding available, practice, the resources available, what has been done already, and be realistic about what can be done in the course of a 3 or 4 year project. And the ranges we give in the work program may be indicative, but are of course based on roadmaps, which are in turn based on the current state of the art. So here is another question on examples for TRL 5 and 6. And certainly we will come up with examples of this. What means validated, which is TRL 5, and what means demonstrated, which is TRL 6. In practice, you will see in the work program that we use these two TRLs together, with very few exceptions. Nevertheless, we will come up with examples also to answer the other question we received on an example of a technology going through the various technology readiness levels. So now, what is proof of concept and what is a prototype of TRL 7? So that I also tried to answer earlier. TRL 7 is meant to be in an operational environment. That is a definition. That is how we understand it. It is used quite extensively in the new work program. You will see that it will be used quite extensively for the contractual public-private partnerships. And there, TRL 7 really means a demonstrator in the industrial environment, something that works. Of course, that is the end point in a project. It is where the project takes the technology and where it stops. Most of the funding will not be for this TRL 7. It will not be for the development happening in the industrial environment. It will be for development up to that point. And in the case of a PPP, of course, there is, as you know, a contractual arrangement which stipulates that there will be further industrial commitment and investment. And this is where we see that the private commitment starting at TRL 7 at that point. I think the next question is similar, but it has a part on miniaturization and upscaling. Which TRL does it take place? Well, in the case of nanotechnology, it takes place at a much earlier stage. But then the question in the case of nanotechnology is whether the miniaturization can be upscaled. And then when we say upscaling, we mean at least TRL 5. So where we refer to upscaling in topics, you will see that it goes with TRL 5 or 6 or 7. Then can the product certification be considered as being at TRL 8? So I don't know what you mean by product certification, but given that our TRLs, in our context, TRLs refer to the technology that feeds into the product, I'm not sure whether TRL 8 is a product certification. In any case, we don't go that far. as you know. How can we distinguish between two TRLs when the project is at the frontier of both? I suppose you mean if the project sits at the interface. But as you've seen, we are not absolute about that. We accept that the project will deal with a range of TRLs and will reach a certain TRL at the end. I hope this answers this particular question. And please come back to me if it doesn't. And TRL 5 and 6, what does it mean, industrially relevant environment? It means it does not have to be in the industry, it does not have to be in a factory, it could be in a research center, but it has to address the kind of problem that industry would have to address in an operational environment. So in terms of upscaling, reliability, and so on. But of course, there is a difference in cost very often. So we expect TRL 5 and 6 in particular to demonstrate what it takes to produce this technology in an industrial environment, but it doesn't have to be the industrial environment. That is why the definition says industrially relevant. So commercial product is TRL 9 or outside. Well, if you look at the single ket, it is beyond TRL 9. But yes, at the end of TRL 9, if everything is at TRL 9, all the constituents, the constituent technologies, then it is a commercial product, excluding the marketing elements and so on. The relation between manufacturing readiness level and TRL, we covered that. Is TRL application specific? I would say no, not in the context of kets, because what we have in mind in kets is the maturity of the ket itself to be, very often we are looking at whether it can be produced. So yes, in general, it could be application specific because, for example, a certain scale of production might be enough for one application, or a certain repeatability might be good enough for one application, but not for another. And we have borne this in mind where we address kets with more than several applications, which we often do in the work program. But in general, we are thinking of several different applications when we are talking about the TRL of a particular ket. And then, of course, you depending on the application, you have other issues that go beyond the question of the TRL of that particular ket. How to determine the corresponding TRL to healthcare? Well, a similar argument applies. In the case of healthcare, additionally, you have the question, which I'm not an expert, but you have the obvious question of clinical trials. And as you know, NMP does not go this far, that far. How the reviewers are instructed about TRLs? Exactly the same way as proposers. How different kets are being evaluated to be assigned to a specific TRL? Well, it is based on roadmaps. As I explained at the beginning, we try to be at the same time realistic and ambitious. In general, we are trying to bridge the all-important gap between TRL 3 and TRL 7, but of course, using different topics at different TRL ranges. And those topics are informed by the various roadmaps that I think you are all familiar with. They come from our technology platforms, and the contractual public-private partnership boards, as well as other inputs like the advisory group. How different models of TRLs are being confronted and integrated? Well, as I said at the beginning, there are different models, and we adapted the somewhat different wordings to come up with a wording that could be used across Horizon. And it is the wording that you see in the work program of Horizon. We have also fine-tuned it to take the concerns, in particular the TRLs 5 and 6, to take the concerns of the program committee members into account. This happened in the context of the first work program. So TRL 4 indicates technology validation in lab, TRL 5 technology validation in relevant environment. Does the scale matter? So yes, the scale matters, but also the concepts are different. In the case of the, it is not sufficient just to put a lab scale equipment in the industrial environment, because there may be problems like, for example, the skills that are needed, how it will be operated in practice, all sorts of issues that are addressed at TRL 5, but not at TRL 4. Yes, most TRL for RIA projects start by default at 4. Why is that? When the word new appears in the call, I would expect lower TRL, and for implementation actions, I would expect higher TRL. This is a good point. We will look at how the word new is used. Maybe I think it is fair to say that in some cases the word new means totally new, whereas in other cases it means a new use of an existing catalyst, let's say. We will look into this, but I think you have already understood the concept of TRLs and what we have in mind. Did proposals tend to indicate what TRL range each work package was contributing to, or was it left to the evaluators? Well, that varied in proposals, and as I said already, often enough evaluators concluded that projects were not realistic with that regard. Whether it will be useful to ask proposers to specify explicitly what each work package, which TRL range each work package contributes to, that may help proposers. I'm not sure about that, but we will discuss this point and see if it might be useful. Certainly, a proposer would have to justify the use. This is not new, of course. Would have to justify what happens in each work package, why funding is requested for that work package, why it is important. And very often it is found that some work packages are not needed because the results should be available, and other times proposers, evaluators find that proposers are trying to cover too wide a TRL range in a proposal, or making unrealistic claims with regard to high TRLs, having started at a relatively low TRL. Were there many proposals that positioned themselves outside the TRL range specified in the work program? No, but as I said, some proposals were unrealistic with regard to the final TRL that we're claiming. What we do say is that where possible, proposals can go beyond the TRL that we target. We would not stop them from doing that as long as they have a credible proposal, and as long as they don't propose to use funding for activities that should be privately funded. But in general, we do not rule out, we never ask for it in this work program or the next one, but we will not rule out the possibility that some development will be done at TRL 8 within a project where appropriate. but we will never ask for TRL 8, and we say that the funding stops at TRL 7 in general, partly because we expect the private commitment to kick in after that, partly because more often than not, the expenditure involved is beyond the scope of Horizon 2020. Excuse me. It would be good to define the scale of the demonstrators that are expected, depending on the TRL and sector. Yes. Well, we do that because we say what the rough scale of the funding is. We give an indicative funding range in each case. But remember that in Horizon we are trying not to be prescriptive. So the ranges we give are indicative. It would be good to define the scale of the demonstrators that are expected depending on the TRL. Sorry, this is the same question. So this brings me to the end of the written questions. I've done my best to answer them with information I have now, and as I said, I take some of these away to discuss with my colleagues. Some of them may have repercussions for the work program that we are now drafting. The wording and the explanations we will provide. And for others, we will try to find the examples that you asked for. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Are there
Nicholas.
more questions?
Do we have more questions that have been asked during the event, Marta?
Yes, we have some, but some of them Nicholas already replied. So the main ones were on the difference between the TRL 5 and 6, the difference between relevant and operational environments. Nicholas also replied to those. Examples, as it was said, will be sent and will be made available. We have some questions about the TRLs. If there are specific descriptions for TRLs applied to the health sector, clinical trials, therapeutics. Nicholas, can you give us more insights on that?
For details, I will have to go to my colleagues in nanomaterials who deal with applications in healthcare. But as you know, we stop roughly where clinical trials begin. So let me get back to my colleagues and try to get a more detailed answer on that one.
Okay, thank you. Then you'll send us, and then we can disseminate this answer to the viewers. And then we have also some questions about the business plans. All the proposals have to include a business plan. And you mentioned that some business plan templates were made. Where can applicants have access to them, or when and where?
Yes, so no, let me say it again, not all proposals have equally good outlined business plans. That's the thing, and it is important. Now, the templates have been developed for the first projects on pilot lines, particular nanotechnology pilot lines. And we developed it in order to help the partners develop their plan and target appropriate markets. So they include questions as to the type and size of the market, how they will go about targeting that market, what steps are needed, what further funding is needed, and so on and so forth. That is initially, we have started offering this to the newly funded projects, pilot lines, for them to prepare their business plan and to present the corresponding deliverable when the time comes. But this template contains elements that are useful to proposers for the outline business plans. So what we are doing now is we are taking the relevant elements, the questions that I just mentioned, and we will put these in the work program as guidance to proposers and evaluators, as I said. And we think that these will be in the introductory part, the introduction to the light part of Horizon, which, as you know, has a uniform approach to KETS. And individual topics will refer to that introduction. So we'll be asking proposers to read that introduction very carefully, because it describes not only the underlying policy, but also very concretely what is expected in a good project. That is also where we will mention the possibility of using synergies with structural funds in the context of an outlined business plan. But as you know, this is never going to be an evaluation criteria. It could be, for some projects, it may be appropriate to be, for it to be a part of the business plan, because the possibility is there, but we will never give extra points for a business plan based on synergies compared to a business plan not based on synergies with structural funds. We just look at the credibility of the business plan.
Okay, thank you. We have just received one more about business plan. What is the lowest TRL that needs a business plan?
Well, in the first work program, we mentioned business plans pretty much everywhere, with the exception of the nano-safety topics and, of course, the CSAs. Of course, a different TRLs, a different kind of business plan is needed. I would say the business plan is needed certainly for all innovation actions. There is no question that an outlined business plan is needed. And also for the research and innovation actions addressing at least 5 or 6, TRL 5 or 6. In any case, to demonstrate impact, you need to know something about the next possible steps after the project. You may not want to call this business plan, I know that, or even outline business plan. But certainly you need, whatever you do, even if it is TRL 3, we don't have so many topics like that, but even if it is TRL 3 or 4, you need to have some idea of what happens next, how you will go beyond once you have a successfully completed project, what happens next. And I hope that the answer is not that we will ask for more funding. Because I remember when I was a project officer in my previous job, I often went to final reviews of projects, of completed projects, and the people would say that we now have a very nice project, and now if we get more funding, we will have another great project. But we don't want, even though you may, of course, participate in a project at a higher TRL in the same field, that goes without saying, it should not be your strategy should not be based on that, I think.
Okay, thank you. It's all about planning, isn't it? Well, I think we don't have any more questions. Our time is almost ending. I just wanted to say that we have been reported some technical problems, and we would like to receive your feedback in order to solve these problems for the next time. And maybe we have a clear indication that the next webinar probably will be about business plans, since there were so many questions about this.
Yes, absolutely. We ourselves will be in a better position to discuss the outlined business plans at the next webinar. Even if the work program is not out by then, we will try to do as much as we can to explain our thinking. We are, of course, going to discuss it with to some extent, we have discussed it already in the program committee, and we will provide more information with the next update to the draft work program. and we will try to refine it further and say a bit more about it at the next webinar, as you say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nicholas, for your availability, and we thank all the attendance of the participants. We believe that this was indeed a very interesting session, and we hope that the discussion may help all the NMP stakeholders in the preparation of fruitful and successful proposals. We wish you all a good afternoon. The web stream will now be ceased. Thank you again, Dr. Nicholas.
Thank you.
Good afternoon from Brussels.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, good afternoon.
Bye-bye.